with regards to residential, commercial, and industrial real estate, I think everyone would want to hear from you what your views are on the current overall landscape in these areas in Canada.
Okay, I'll just give a quick sort of synopsis on each one of them because they each have different risks. Industrial, not surprisingly, has been the best performer so far. It has an exceptionally low vacancy, whether you're talking about Vancouver or Toronto, in around the 2% of vacancy rate, which is basically unheard of in my career. And it's had continued demand in the second quarter as well. So it's not like the vacancy rate is going to skyrocket. It's all the trends that you know about with e-commerce. It just seems as though industrial is the one sector that's going to continue to perform well. We have probably 5 or 6 equity investments in industrial buildings, usually conversions from one large industrial building divided into smaller condominium units. And they're continuing to sell. Right to today, they're continuing to sell and at above pro forma prices. So it's amazing how well that sector has performed. And you can see it in the TSX REIT index, which looks at the different categories of REITs. And the industrial REIT sector has performed by far the best of any of these sectors. So that's the first one. Apartments would probably be the next lowest risk. I would say they performed acceptably, not outstandingly. I think that top-end rents have been hit a bit. And my worry personally is about rent collections going forward because the CERB program, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit Program, where 8.6 million people are getting $2,000 a month, is going to be at its end very shortly. And I think rent collections will suffer because it's well known in this recession that lower income and middle income people bear the brunt of the unemployment, and those tend to be renters. So I think apartments are doing fine now, but I think it'll have a rougher time over the next 6 months or so. Not so much that apartment landlords will be losing their buildings, but just that their income will not hold up as well as industrial will. Office is the most complicated one because there's the trend towards working remotely, which suggests less need for office space, but physical distancing is the opposite. It suggests more need for square footage per worker, which was down around 100 square feet per worker. You can't do that going forward. So it's difficult to know what's going to happen in office. The one thing I'm pretty sure about is the downtown office, which again has an exceptionally low vacancy rate in both Toronto and Vancouver, will do the best. And in particular, mid-rise buildings will do the best. So a top-notch mid-rise building in downtown Vancouver or Toronto, I think will be the most attractive building because you don't have the situation which the really tall office buildings have, which will be the elevator access and overcrowding in the elevators, which is a big concern to the major businesses who occupy that space.
And then if you were to talk about actual sectors that have been the hardest hit, like retail, hospitality, and I guess long-term care homes, do you have exposure to any of these sectors through Atrium or CMCC?
Yeah, we have very limited exposure, almost none to hospitality, almost none to long-term care. I would say that's a bit of a fluke because long-term care was viewed as very low risk. In fact, most financing for long-term care is low cost CMHC insured financing. So obviously we're not competitive in that area because our rates average 8% and a CMHC insured mortgage would be in the 2 to 3% range. So to some extent it's bad luck for those who lent on long-term care facilities because that was not viewed as a high risk sector. I think that's not the case for hotels, where it was always viewed as a sector that did extremely well in good times and very poorly in bad times. It has a high beta, if you will. Retail, we focused, to the extent we have exposure, which is very little, we focused on urban retail. The difference between urban retail and, say, your average mall is urban retail is really, in most cases, successful by the volume of traffic, usually condominiums, downtown. So our urban retail tend to be on King West and King West and Queen West in downtown West. And I think that area will do okay. I wouldn't be surprised if the rents come down because they went up very sharply. And we actually stopped lending and stopped investing in that area about 2 or 3 years ago because the rents were getting really, really high, like in the $100 range.
And so